Good morning, people. And today, in this cold month of December, we are all sitting comfortably, I hope, and reasonably warm to listen to an interesting talk by Patsy, which is called A Dangerous Hobby.
Thank
Patsy.
you, Ray. Um, I'm having a little bit of trouble squaring my face up to the screen because I'm not in my usual position with the desktop. I've got people cutting the hedges and trees in the garden, so I've had to come into the front of the house, and I'm balancing the laptop on a small table, and I'm having quite a bit of trouble getting my face into the screen. So forgive me if I bob around a bit. I'm going to try not to notice myself because I shall become distracted by anxiety about my public profile if I'm not careful, which would be dreadful. Gordon, if you wanted to raise your hand, if you couldn't hear me, I would be always happy to try if raising my voice helps. But I appreciate it certainly doesn't always help me, but sometimes it does, you know. Anyway, my dangerous hobby. Well, by now you've probably heard that what it is, I think I could say was, but I'm not going to guarantee it. Hitchhiking on my own. Um, this was a tremendous thing for me. I had a very prim upbringing, I would say, as a young lady. My parents belonged to that section of the working class which, having acquired a lot of skills, it's got its eyes fixed on the lower middle class. And my parents also had me when they were 40, and they were a bit out of it, you know, compared with younger parents. And they still had a lot of the ways of seeing how girls should be brought up and should behave of an earlier time. And I was really very innocent. I'd come through secondary school. I went to a grammar school, mixed grammar school, and yeah, I was awfully cut off from the world, but without realizing it, you know. And so I go up to Birmingham when I was 18, used at the University of Birmingham to do my first degree, and it was terribly exciting. I met people I had could not have imagined meeting before, and they said such strange things. Like sometimes it seemed like the whole world had gone a bit mad. Um, for example, I had to share a room, which was a new experience for me because I've been lucky enough to have my own bedroom all my life. And the girl I shared with, not that she hitched, but she had had a very much more adventurous lifestyle than I had. And she was very into clothes. Now, it's hard to describe really the difference between living in Swindon as a girl and then going up to Birmingham. Birmingham was, to me, big city. I'd only been to London to see things like the zoo for the day with my parents, so I had no concept of what a really big city was like. And to me, Birmingham was it. And the stores, they had these wonderful stores like Rackham's. And my friend and roommate, Julie, and I would spend, well, all day, you know, going around the department stores. I had a small grant to live on, but you see, nobody has ever taught me about budgeting. They probably did actually, but I didn't register it. You know, you know, one often doesn't. To me, having suddenly access via a checkbook to £300 in the bank. And there are all these wonderful things, particularly a suede jacket. I'd always wanted a suede jacket. And guess what? I acquired one, £200, I remember it as being. So two-thirds of my grant wiped out. Um, my B&B had been paid for, so I wasn't about to be made homeless on account of this. But it meant that I had to manage an entire term on a very small amount of money, and of course it was really difficult. Well, the thing is, you see, I wanted to go home to Swindon to see my boyfriend. I had a boyfriend I had acquired at school. He was down at sometimes at Bournemouth and sometimes at Poole. He was doing a combined engineering course, and we would meet up at Swindon. But you see, it's quite difficult to get to Swindon without any money. Now, I had heard about this thing called hitching, but it was something, the way it was described to me, I only heard about it in Birmingham, as a couple of the boys used to do it. They did it together. I mean, people did know about it, although not the people I knew. I mean, I know now that it was something that was quite commonplace in the forces in and just after the war. I mean, people had to hitch to get around, but that was outside my knowledge. All I knew about with hitching was that a couple of boys had done it, and they seemed to have got on all right. So, comes one Friday, and off I go down the Bristol Road. And that was the way you had to go. And to my surprise, I got a lift really quite quickly. I'm not really surprised because I was an 18-year-old girl in a fairly short skirt and a suede jacket, so I probably looked like a good person to pick up. But luckily, I had perfectly pleasant and what's the word I'm looking for? Non-troublesome drivers. And I think I got to Swindon really quite quickly. I was no end pleased with myself because I saved all the money I would have spent on the train, and furthermore, I'd had no trouble. It'd have been fine. I was really, really thrilled. Anyway, I'll get back to Birmingham, and I obviously tell all my friends about this wonderful experience and this wonderful discovery I'd made. It wasn't just boys who could do it. Look, I can do it too. I've just done this. I told everyone. They were absolutely horrified. Absolutely, without exception. They just couldn't believe I hadn't been attacked, raped, robbed, etc., etc. Everyone said, you must never do that again. You must take a friend. Well, when one's young, one does tend rather to listen to one's peers. So the next time, in fact, the next time I was hitching, it wasn't to go down to Swindon. It was going to London. I forget why now. And I asked a friend, I won't name her, a friend of mine, who also wanted to go to London. And I said, another girl, let's hitch together. This is what everyone advises me to do. So off we go. Uh, well, we did get to London, I'm happy to say. But really, it was no thanks at all to the young lady I had with me. She flirted with the driver. She pulled her skirt up slightly to show her nice knees. She chattered about her just various aspects of her life, really. Nothing odd, but nothing about the driver. All about herself. And we got to a service station, and the roads were different in those days. There wasn't a quick direct motorway from Birmingham to London. I mean, I actually forget at what point we were able to join. I think it was the M1, which had been built. But anyway, we got the motorway service station of some sort. And I was surprised to see that it wasn't just our lorry which had pulled in, but several other lorries had pulled in behind us. And the next thing I noticed, because I'm quite a noticing sort of person, I noticed that the drivers were all talking to each other. And all I can say is it rang alarm bells. It wasn't because I knew a lot about girls being hurt or raped or anything like that. I just didn't have that knowledge. I really didn't. There was something about it that made me feel frightened. And I said, I want to get the bus. And of course, we couldn't find a bus anywhere. I persuaded her about the bus, but we couldn't find one. In the end, we had to hitch another car that took us down to London. So we actually did all right. but I never hitched with somebody else again. It made me aware that I was not in control of the situation, that whatever the other person did would also have consequences for me. And if I was on my own, it was just me and the driver. I learned ever such a lot from that particular experience. I learned how important it is to have the driver talking to you, have that chat. It was usually a man. Have the man talking about his family, particularly himself, what he liked to do, but keeping it towards family and his family relationships. Steer it away from yourself. Don't talk about your boyfriend or your girlfriend or anything, like that. You keep it about him. This gives him a nice time, but it also makes him less likely to look at you in a kind of intimate way. I learned this quite slowly, actually. It's just that over time I did a lot of hitching, and this knowledge of mine sort of expanded. The importance of the driver being enjoying himself and talking, but not thinking, here's a possibility here if we pull into a lay-by. And in fact, I'm not sure that ever did happen. So I think I managed to keep people talking, which is quite a good ploy. Just keep them talking. And just having a quick look at my notes here, so I don't miss anything out. Yeah, always hitched alone. Yeah, that's right. Oh, and clothing was very important too. I stopped wearing a skirt. Um, this was because after my first hitching trip, I realised it was extremely difficult. Actually, it wasn't possible to climb into a lorry modestly wearing a skirt, and you really do want to look reasonably modest, not too butch, but not too modest either. Something in between. Nothing that gives any ideas. Isn't it terrible? I'm listening to myself. I'm thinking how dreadful it is that one had to. I'm using past tense. I'm not sure to what extent it's still true. The extent to which I had to look out for how I appeared in case I got attacked, in case I got into trouble. But also learning that presentation was, I can't say it was all because people still do get attacked, but presentation is a great deal. So how you come across, confidence, pleasantness, thinking about the other person and getting them engaged is just so important, and that applies whichever country you're hitching in. Anyway, the next thing that happened in my life, not connected with hitching, was I got pregnant by my boyfriend, unfortunately and happily. And so I was off the road for a while. I had two small children. I got my degree, and yeah, I didn't do any hitching for a bit. And then my boyfriend's father, who was really clever at building things, he built, this would appeal to you, David, he built me an Austin 7. He, the Austin 7 that my husband had, he built too. He worked in a garage and he got the pieces and he literally built it. What was good was he showed me what he'd done. So I had a good idea with the Austin 7 of how to look after it, which didn't transfer particularly well to modern cars. In fact, I don't think it would transfer at all. Anyway, so we have to leap on a few years now. My marriage has fallen into a bad state. One of the things that used to make me happy was making sure the children were looked after, going off and hitching. I loved hitching. I liked meeting the drivers and I loved where we could go. So I would say I was about 24, 25. I hadn't been married that long. And I did my first hitchhike abroad. Um, I wasn't actually going abroad at the time. I'd had a row with my husband, and I did go off hitching because I was fed up. I thought I was leaving home. I don't like this really because you can hear how incredibly immature and stupid I was, and I don't really much like revealing that. But it is true. I was both of those things. Anyway, I hitched off because I was angry and upset. And what I hitched on that occasion was one of the big Scanias. Do you know the big Scania? Huge things. I mean, they. After that, I learned how important it was to hitch a Scania because they're always going a long way. And this one was. He was going into Germany. It was wonderful. It was so exciting. I mean, being right up in the air like that, you have a wonderful view of the road. And I'd learned all my lessons about engaging the driver, keeping him chatting. He was a thoroughly nice man, family man, and he was pleased to have company. And we got to. I don't really know where it was. It was very high up indeed, and it was still in France. We hadn't crossed over into another country at that stage. And he was tired. And when he said he was tired, I thought, oh God, here we go after all. But all it was he wanted to get down and light a fire. Well, he had a little stove, and we cooked on this stove out in the open air in the icy cold air, and it was just so exciting. It really was. Just the icy air and the oh, sorry, that's the hedge cutters outside. I hope they will. Yeah, you better put your hands up if there's a hearing problem, look, because they suddenly started cutting hedges around the front as well. I didn't know they were going to do that. Yeah, so then he had a kip in the back, and he gave me a blanket so I could have a kip in the front. And then after a couple of hours, we drove on, and I got out. Oh dear, what do you think about the noise?
We're not hearing it, Patsy. It's interfering with your voice a bit, but we're not hearing the noise.
Right. Okay. Hold on, guys. Everybody, take a short break. It's only going to be a couple of minutes. I have to change rooms. Okay.
Okay. We could chop this out of the final recording, even. It will be seamless.
I could always fill in with my tales of hitchhiking as well.
Well, yeah, great. Well,
I particularly wanted to come to this because I haven't met that many other people who've done lots of hitchhiking.
Yeah. I'm thinking of my adventures, but I think ladies who've survived hitchhiking deserve, special privileges.
Because and there's somebody else I'm still in touch with. She was a member of Redland Meeting, and she was a single parent, and she had a 3-year-old child, and she hitchhiked all around France with a 3-year-old child.
Wow.
So, but I'll chip in later if perhaps when Patsy's finished her tales.
I used to hitchhike from London down to Sussex because basically they hadn't any money and it was going to see the folks. So that was.
You're on mute, Ray.
No, we heard him though. I hitchhiked down to the south of France with a friend of mine once, and we had a little holiday down there. And then he decided he wanted to go home early or something, so we split up. And I went out to a roundabout, stuck my thumb out, and this motor scooter pulled up, and this guy said, "David," and it was a mate of mine. From university, and he took me as far as Aix-en-Provence, which wasn't very far, dropped me off there, and I stood beside the roadside, and this Mercedes came up a slip road and screeched to a halt, swerving, and stopped. And it turned out to be the sales manager of Mercedes UK, and he took me back he delivered me to my house and bought me the most incredible dinner on the boat. So yes, we have adventures. Patsy, you're back. Over to you.
bit ropey, but yes, it's fine. And he does seem to be safely around the front of the house now, and I'm back to the back of the house, so we should be okay. Golly, where did I get to? Oh, I was in telling you about my mountain top. Yes, okay. When he dropped me off, I actually stopped being happy. It was actually really difficult because I haven't encountered out of bounds before. I don't know, I think we had the M1 in England at that point. If we had other motorways, I hadn't been on them. So it was terribly difficult. Whereas I was used to standing by the roadside and putting my thumb out, instead I had to cross all sorts of pieces of terrifying road, often in the dark, trying to work out not just which was the place to stand, for the route, but also which direction the traffic was going in. And I went home. I'm afraid that was a rather inglorious end to what was otherwise a great fun for me. Not less so, of course, for the family I had left behind. I still did quite a bit of pitching the next few years, even though it was not seen as appropriate by anybody, for a youngish woman to be doing. I hitched in Italy, and I hitched all the way through France. I hitched in Switzerland. I found it made a huge difference, the nationality of the drivers. I mean, and I think another thing that was relevant was I was an English girl just after the war, and it was amazing how many prejudices we had about people of other nationalities, and we didn't recognise that we had them at all. So I already had a little mindset about how drivers would behave because they were Italian or French or German, and I don't know how much that influenced the way they did behave, but they did. The Italians were particularly keen to get a grope, and the French were extremely flirty, but they didn't necessarily mean it. I had to learn all these things extremely fast and keep on talking and getting them talking. So as I say, I think nationality was a big thing. But really, I was just doing it for love in a way. At home, I had to be a modest housewife and mother. And on the road, I could be anybody really. I loved it. I really, really loved it. I loved it like gypsies love their caravans, I think. It just felt totally me to be traveling and to be engaging all the time with different people. And I really liked it. I continued to do it, in fact, until I was 44. And having got through a period of alcohol addiction, and having a lot of friends suddenly to talk to who genuinely did take an interest in my life, I quite casually dropped the comment how much I loved hitchhiking. And one friend was so horrified that she said that she would, in future, anytime I wanted to hitch somewhere, let her know, and she'd buy me a train ticket. And she meant it. And I could have just said no, but I don't know really. I suppose I like the idea of the train ticket, and maybe I was worried I wouldn't actually get the lift now I was older, although I think you would. I don't think it's got anything to do with being young. I think, I don't know. I'm just theorising now, because in fact I haven't hitched since that day. But I would. I would definitely hitch if I needed to. And I would actually like to. I think it would be fun. So I'm not by any means going to say that that's it. I finished doing it. It was too dangerous. It isn't necessarily dangerous. You can be unlucky. Of course you can. You can be unlucky just on your doorstep. You could have a bad neighbour, or anything can happen to you. But there was something about it as an activity which I really loved. I'm really sorry, but I have come to the end of my notes. You would think, really, since I'm the person sitting here listening to these every week, you'd think I'd know better about organising enough material, but I'm feeling more confident about the situation because I know some of you have got, I caught just the end of what David was saying, I've also had experiences of history, and so I don't feel too bad about handing over to Ray and asking you if you will ask for questions, or not necessarily questions, input.
David?
But just as a quickie, I think it's wonderful that you've chosen this topic, Patsy. I was intrigued to find out what it was going to be. And I think that others have got things to say, but I just jotted down a few things. And when I've got a car, I always give people lifts whenever I can. Just one quickie, I picked up a lorry driver once, holding up his trade plates, and we're going down the motorway, and he said, "Oh, I want to get off at the next junction." And I sort of slightly joking, I was overtaking a line of cars and lorries at the time, and I just said, "Oh, just one more lorry," meaning I'll overtake one more lorry, which meant that I'd have to say it'd be a little bit fine coming. And he sort of said, "It's you," meaning that lorry drivers are always getting cut off by people at junctions. So he was joking, but it's always fun, both hitchhiking oneself and picking up people for company. I'm sure lots of experiences. Angela's gone away. I know she's got something as well, but Marion probably.
If my screen goes funny, it's because I'm carrying the laptop to a different room. It depends. I know. It depends which piece of the garden he's cutting. So.
No, Marianne, you said you were going to...
I asked what the hobby was, because when I found out it was hitchhiking, I thought, well, I have to make space for this, because I used to love hitchhiking. I especially like traveling with lorry drivers because you have this wonderful seat high up. And most lorry drivers, I mean, they were going from A to B. They weren't interested in any hanky panky, except one who had a really awful old lorry, could hardly hear above the noise, and he sort of yelled above the thing, said, "Do you feel like a bit of sex?" And I said, "No thanks, I'm going to Manchester." And he said, "Okay, sorry I asked." And I did have a few near scrapes, but I did mostly lorry drivers. I felt much safer with, because they were more predictable. They had a job to do, and they were glad of the company. And I think that it's more restricted now. I'm not sure if they're allowed to pick people up, but it was they were just such a fascinating bunch, because you think, okay, lorry driver, but there were several lorry drivers who'd given up other jobs. There were people who'd been teachers, people who'd been social workers, people who'd done all sorts of different things. And then they would tell me about their families, they'd tell me about their hobbies. I remember one who worked with disabled children in his spare time, and another one who wrote poetry, and another one who painted. It was just so fascinating, and just climbing right up into the where you had this wonderful view. I just thought it was terrific. A bit like Patsy, I kind of started off because I couldn't get home when they axed. I was on a course in Leicester, and I was trying to visit my home in Reading, and there had been a train line, but they'd axed it, and there really wasn't much. It was a very difficult journey to go all around the houses. Although I have to say that route was not terribly productive for hitchhiking either. I remember sort of standing by the roadside for quite long periods of time. And like Patsy, I learned lots of lessons, perhaps different ones. I kind of learned where to stand. Do not stand near a junction because they can't stop.
Yeah.
Stand near a lay-by where they can stop. Don't usually stand on anywhere near a motorway. Service stations were quite good because people weren't traveling very fast. They were just on their way out slowly, and so this is a service station. So there's lots of little tips about where to stand and how to be. And I always took a map. That was my kind of safety thing. I was practically always wearing trousers anyway. But having a map, then if somebody was going off course or doing something, not very toward, I think I remember I was in Sweden, I think. And somebody was going, said they were going to one place, but they weren't. They were meandering around, and I kind of said, "No, I'm going to whatever it is. Please drop me here." And then there were other times when there was yes, there was. I think there was somebody who was speaking to me in Norwegian and saying, "Let's go down. Let's go and lie down in the long grass, etc." And I just said, "Sorry. Sorry, only speak English." So the worst time was when I completely misread a situation. I think it was I was with a friend and we were hitchhiking around France. I actually think France is not a very brilliant country to hitchhike around. Partly because there were the particular things I actually misjudged the time at the sunset because it's earlier as you go further south in the summer. It's earlier, so we got off the boat and started hitching. And we had a hitch in quite a small car. I don't know if it was a 2CV. And we were going ever so slowly, and it was getting dusky, and we kept stopping for coffees and things, and I would hurry back to the car and climb in the back, and then it got dark and I got quite worried, and they stopped again and they said, "That's it, one in the front, one in the back." And I suddenly found words in French that I didn't know I had, and sort of said, I think they started on my friend who didn't speak any French at all, and I had some, and so I said sort of, "None of that, drop us at the next village." And they did. I was so grateful, and there was a shop open late because in those days French shops opened late in the way that British shops didn't. And I remember stumbling there saying, "Is there anywhere we can camp?" And they said, "Yes, out the back with some English families." I've never been so grateful to meet with some English families, and don't normally gravitate towards other people from England if I'm abroad. And after that we said, okay, we do not hitchhike after lunch. We will just make sure it's daylight. And that worked well. We tended to come across people who are kind of like uncles. What are you two girls doing out on the road? You should be at home with your mums. Because I think French families were much more protective. When I did a French exchange, I had a great time, but when my French opposite number came to England, she was so homesick that she couldn't enjoy anything. So I think just because English kids had more freedom, girls particularly. So those are kind of some of the things that kind of come to mind. And I think I stopped when I decided that I had to buy a car. I was quite sorry, really, because then I didn't have the excuse of going hitchhiking. But then I've given lifts to other people as well. I don't know what it would be like now. I found that I had short hair, and I found that I got lots of lifts because even though I had short hair, it was a time when boys and men had short back and side. But once men grew their hair, people were much less. They thought they just thought I was a long-haired man, and so they're less likely to give me lifts.
Yes.
Anyway, I must leave space for other people because I'm sure lots of people have got stories about hitchhiking.
Patty, you have your hand up.
Yeah. I'll deal with the hand shortly. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
We can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, right. I can't hear Ray. Ray's frozen now. The best hitchhike I ever had. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yes. Thank you.
No, you
Yeah.
can't. Oh, can you? Okay, I was on a holiday with my dad, and he was 84 or 85, and he wanted to go to Dubrovnik. And I found a trip with the Ramblers. And at 84, I asked him how far he thought he could walk. He said he thought he could walk 3 miles. So when we realized he couldn't, the very kind organizer arranged a short walk for us, and he suggested that we took a bus back from the walk. We went out in the van with the other people, and they carried on to their walk. We went for a little walk, and at about a mile and a bit, he couldn't walk any further. And the setup was that the route was to a restaurant. Very clever. So I just hitchhiked. So the two of us got picked up in a little Fiat 500. And when he wanted to open the window, he picked up the handle from the middle of the car, put it on the door, opened the window. And luckily, I had been told that they don't accept gifts. So I had in my rucksack some packets of sweets. And I left one on the seat when we left. But he took us right to the restaurant. On the way back, similar thing. Couldn't walk very far, hitchhiked. And a family picked us up, a mum and a dad and their child. And they were going into Dubrovnik to buy him shoes. And I heard what it was like to be in the war and to be evacuated, and how she had gone to another town on the coast further up, and I can't remember the details, but it was such a wonderful experience to have a very personal story about being in that war. And there we go. That's my story.
Just talking about war. One time when I was in Norway, I was hitching over the mountain pass, and somebody stopped, and when they found out I was British, they said, because of the war, we give you a lift because of the war. And I kind of thought, I didn't do anything, but that was the kind of the politics then. I know some people travelled with Union Jacks. I never did, but I don't know if you did, Patsy.
I couldn't quite hear that, Marianne, sorry.
I was talking about the Norwegians picking me up because of the British contribution of the war.
No, I heard. I heard.
Yeah. And some people travelled with Union Jacks. I didn't, but I wondered if you did.
Right. No, I hadn't realised that. No, I hadn't really taken that on board. I think it was more the English people, the English drivers, that were more likely to talk to me about the war, because I guess probably you had a slightly better command of language than I had, because I got French A level, but really that was laughable. It didn't improve my French much, and I'd done a bit of work in France as well, but in my case, I don't know what it was really. I came back to England, and it seemed to me that my French had improved immeasurably. But then the next time I went to France, I found that I still couldn't understand other people. They seemed able to understand me, but I couldn't quite get them. I don't know, I obviously didn't have quite the right gift for languages, I think. Maybe it was my hearing, I don't know.
I do think it's harder to hear new languages and to understand them, even with sign language. I mean, I can see all the signing they're doing, but I can't necessarily understand it when they go that fast, or I don't know the words, or they've got a different sign for the words, or you might have a different accents and things. That's the hardest bit of learning a language, I think, is receiving it well.
A really funny time that I started. I wasn't actually very experienced at hitching, and I went on holiday. I was going to go to Finland on a Russian boat, that was extremely cheap. But I was so seasick that I got off at Stockholm. And no, not Stockholm. The other one on the other side, Gothenburg. I got off there and stayed in a hostel, and then started hitching to Stockholm. And the first lift that I got, there were all sorts of gestures I didn't understand, but they were taking me to their house, and I kind of thought, oh, is this really dodgy? But somehow I just had the feeling that it wasn't. And in the end, they just wanted to take me home as a guest. And then they found a 16-year-old who could speak English. And I learned a few words of Swedish, which was, you know, no end handy for the next lifts. So, and they were really, I kept in touch with them for years, you know, sort of by Christmas cards, and I, you know, put my sort of 3 words of Swedish on I think I can still remember.
Can I say something
think-
about Norwegian and the affection that they have for Brits? It's enormous.
Yeah.
What's your experience then, Hattie?
Well, my dad's sister married a Norwegian, so there's a big Norwegian contingent in the family, and we're always welcomed. I mean, I know because I'm in the family, but other Norwegians, when you're English, you know, there's always an openness about it and an interest and a love. Very important.
I think the worst lift I came across, and you know, I've had a number to chuck around quite a lot, and in England that is, and they chucked abroad, which I admire you friends for having done that, for the kind of well done you, as the phrase goes. But I was hitchhiking from London down to Sussex, and bloke picked me up in his car and spent the next 2 hours raging of how much he hated black people. You know, and it was just, you know, because you can't actually say it. Well, I think you're blinging wrong, you know, because you know it could become quite awkward. So I just did a lot of hms and ahs and things like that, you know, but it was pretty horrible, you know. But yeah, had lots of different, you know, kind of lorries and things like that. And I agree, people with lorries, because if you're sitting way above, you look down on all the other cars going past, and they look particularly rather like ants going down the road as you're sitting there, and it's blinging great transport, which sometimes is very hard to get into because they're quite high up. And it's like, you know, climbing up these things, like, you know, do I need a rope and pitons and things like that? Anyway.
The funniest time, tell me if I'm talking too much, but the funniest time when I exploited the differences between nations was in France. Mike and I were staying at a little hotel in a small town, and we wanted to go and see some famous gorges, Gorge du Tarn, and there was no bus. And so we hitched, we tried to hitch, we waited ages and ages and ages. And then a woman picked us up and she said, I felt sorry for you because the French don't pick up hitchhikers. They think that if people want to travel, they should have their own cars. So I felt sorry for you and I've given you a lift. So we had our lift, and we sort of, you know, we had a nice time sort of, you know, wandering around. Then we wanted to go back. We couldn't find, you know, nobody stopped. Nobody gave us the lift back. Finally, it got dark, and we went into a cafe, and we asked if we could just sleep there overnight, sort of on the floor, because we couldn't think what else to do. And there was somebody there who was a teacher on holiday, because he loved the region, and he said, "Oh," he said, "I will take you back to your hotel." It was 30 miles away, which is really kind of him. And he said, if you get the early bus in the morning, I will show you around the Gorge du Tarn. I love this region. And so we got back, and I said to Mike, of course he doesn't mean it. That's sort of things that French people say, but he doesn't mean it. And Mike said, oh, surely he does. Surely he wouldn't have said it otherwise. Mike's very straightforward, sort of honest, straight up sort of Englishman. And so I said, well, we can exploit the difference. We'll get the early bus and see what happens. So we did. We got the early bus. We arrived. The early bus was about 6 o'clock. So we arrived about 7 o'clock. Went to his house. And you could see he was totally flustered, totally not expecting us. And, we could have innocently standing or sitting by, and I could sort of hear what he's saying to his wife. He was saying, I wasn't expecting these people to turn up. I suppose we better give them a cup of coffee and a croissant, and I better sort of take them around a bit. But I won't be long. I'll be back by coffee time. So he started, and he was the sort of teacher who loved teaching, loved expounding on things, and particularly as he loved the region, he couldn't stop talking. He couldn't stop showing us. So coffee time came and went, and then it was nearly lunchtime. And he said, oh, well, so he phoned his wife and said, look, I'm stuck out here with these people, and it's lunchtime. So we're going to have a little snack. So we had this, sort of breadsticks. What are they called? I can't remember. The long things.
Baguette.
Baguette.
So we had baguette and ham and wine. And then he took us all the way back, because by now we were sort of quite away from his house, and he dropped us at a bus stop for about 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock. So we got a lovely tour of the Gorge du Tarn, which he absolutely hadn't meant to give us, but because we kind of innocently sort of exploited that difference, we were lucky. So that was very nice.
Yeah. It is a very beautiful region. It's it rang a bell when you said it, and I was thinking, yes, it was just up the road, near Montauban is where I was doing an exchange.
Oh, right.
And I can't remember how I got to visit the Gorge du Tarn, but I did go. I had a fairly miserable time on the exchange. I didn't get on with the other girls. We were being monitrices in one of the colonies de vacances. I was just very young and very stupid, and I didn't behave properly. I kept myself to myself too much, and I took an English book with me to read, all the things that you shouldn't do, So it was entirely my fault that I didn't get on well. And they were very nice to me, and they still took me to places. And it is a very beautiful region. I've tried to visit it since, to look around and find the places that I saw when I was 18, and some of them I was able to find, and some of them had changed so much as to be quite unrecognizable. Anyway, anyone else wanted to?
I do.
Patty's got her hand up again. Patty, you're muted.
Unmute. Yes, I'm unmuted now. Yeah. The worst experience I had was in South Africa. This is thinking about ranting about Black people, and I was on I don't know a sabbatical. No, not sabbatical, but you have holidays from being a medical student, and we had 4 weeks in which we had to have a holiday, and I fixed up to go to South Africa, and I was a pre-medical student. Actually, I was in undergraduate. Anyhow, I had an attachment at a certain hospital, and then I had time off to go and see the place. And I went with another 19-year-old. I was maybe 20, no, I was 21, and they were 19 in their gap year. And we decided to hitchhike south along the east coast of South Africa. And I knew my racial opinions, and I asked her, please, if she would sit in the front and talk to the driver. And so all did actually go pretty well. I steered out of trouble because I wanted to. And then we stayed in a hotel overnight at East London, and it was absolutely bloody cold. And the hotel seemed to be empty, but the guy said that, you know, if we needed anything in the night, this was the door to knock on. So I was so damn cold that I went and knocked on the door and asked for another blanket or two. Anyway, he went down the corridor with me to get blanket from the cupboard, and there was a cupboard, and his mind turned. Oh my God, I had to almost fight my way out of that and, you know, get back along the corridor. But I was so perishing cold, I really, you know, but anyway, I beat him off.
It's to do with connotations, I think, of you know, bedding made him think about bed and you together rather than, you know, guest and corridor. I think it's I don't know. Glad you escaped.
So am I, jolly, yeah. And being picked up by a drunk person once. I think there were 3 of us hitchhiking to London. Oh, we were coming back from London, actually, and we were desperate to get home, really, and it was in the dark. And this guy was actually, the alcohol was reeking, and I was really worried. And the other 2 also got in the car, and at a certain point, I said, look, can you let us off here? Thank you. And we walked the rest of the way, miles, but we still walked.
Mm-hmm. Do girls, young girls, hitch now?
Don't
know.
No,
Yeah,
I don't think
but
so.
students, do they hitch now, or do they all have cars? I mean, a lot of them seem to have their own car, you know, from about age 18.
Well,
And
a lot of courses require it. You know, if you do anything like nursing or any of the kind of health things, you have placements, and they're at all random times of the day and night, and so you need your own transport to get there and back.
Christopher.
Yes, you know, it reminded me of I think I must have been hitching back home from the Lake District or somewhere. I'm not sure, and I'm not sure what age I was at the time. But I got picked up in a very posh car, a very posh man. And it was clear after a while that, you know, if I'd been available, he would have really liked to have had some sexual content. So I just played dumber than I usually am and just, you know, misunderstood him the whole way. And then, you know, got away with it. But yeah, yes, you have brought back some memories, Patsy. You know.
Well, the world is a very different place. It is really. I don't know what it would be like hitching now. I suspect it might be okay because of my age. I think people would stop and think, "Oh, poor old thing." Well, they might do anyway. Then again, they might think I was a tramp and they didn't want to stop. I don't know. But I'm very tempted to try and find out, except I don't actually need to go anywhere at the moment. But
One of the most wonderful things of mine was getting a hitchhike with a woman, and I was going up from Sussex to Birmingham, and for a couple of hours we were just discussing classical music, because she had some Telemann on the CD, and you know, and it's one of the composers I quite like, flute concertos, you know, and just wonderful with a, you know, in good chat, beautiful music. What else could you need? But there you go. David, you waved a hand. You're muted, mate.
oh,
You're
Unmute.
still muted, David.
Yeah, Christopher's mention of hitchhiking back from the Lake District. I went up to the lakes hitchhike with a buddy had a holiday with my sister up there, and we hitchhiked back, and it was, I mean, it took forever to get rides, and they were short. It was like and it was almost 2 hours to the minute before we'd get the ride. We started to notice that it was just taking forever. And we finally ended up being dropped off quite late at night by the roundabout at the southern end of the Dartford toll tunnel. And we slept in an underpass and then got up in the morning and got out on the road, and it was a cold day. And we got a lift from an army lorry, right? And we were in the back of it. So it was an open lorry with a canvas cover, and the front of the canvas cover was unsecured. So the wind was blowing straight through. And this was Easter. And then for the only time that year, it started snowing as we were going down the M2. We were frozen by the time we got to Canterbury. We stood in the bus station and called up my mate's dad, and he basically came out and rescued us, unfroze us. But yeah, so yes, it's an adventure, isn't it? You know, it's you take
Certainly is that.
you have to survive best you can. So yes, sometimes it's magical, and sometimes it's like pretty scary.
Yes.
Well, were you ever tempted to hitchhike, or
Who? Patsy,
you're muted, mate?
Patty's got her hand up again, but she's muted. I muted her because she's
always in a car.
yeah.
Broke very early. The only interesting thing about that was I never took a driving test. It was a blessing that was bestowed on me by Her Majesty's military very early on. And so I've had a whole life in cars, and picking people occasionally, but nothing of that. One occasion in south of France, I was we're studying with a friend of mine paintings of Cézanne in that house, and on the way back, we had to pass through a little tunnel which was at an angle to the road, and the car zoomed through it, clipped our car, put it out of action, and we were stuck there in the south of France. I left the car on a local nearby garage, and I'd stay there until I could pick it up later. Well, sent home. In fact, it was sent home on the insurance. But I had to hitch a lift then, and all I remember was being left in a filling station just outside Lyon, and having to spend the night there. I mean, on the filling station. But that's the only adventure I had in this line.
Patty?
Well, I had a lovely experience once. My mother was on dialysis, and I was young 20s, I suppose, and I was at home during the holidays. And I'd had to go to London for some reason. When I took the train out of London, plenty of time to get home and help her go on dialysis. The train I was on turned out to be going all the way to Swansea, hardly stopping at all. And I needed to get off at Didcot. And I told the ticket collector what's happened, you know, where? And the ticket collector was great. He said, look, we slow down at a certain point before Didcot. You can just get off onto the track and go down the side onto the road. So I did that, stuck out my thumb to hitchhike. I had to get home quickly. I was outside Didcot, and a Tappings bus stopped to pick me up. My God, I thought, oh, this must be irregular. Anyway, we had such a lovely chat, and of course, because Tappings was based in Wallingford, which is where I wanted to go, he gave me this ride home. Now, whether he'd recognised me as, you know, living around the corner and down the road, quite far from Tappings, I don't know, because I've been brought up in that town all my life. But I thought that was so sweet, and it all worked out well in the end.
That's amazing, though,
Sounds
isn't it?
really dangerous getting off the train while it's moving.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You're
Because
muted.
you're muted.
Sometimes I just, I had to get home to put Mum on dialysis. I had to.
Yeah. I've never got off a train like that, but I do tend to panic on the modern trains because I don't think you could get off very easily. You're kind of sealed in, aren't you? So you wouldn't be able to hop off so easily at Dickon these days. Um,
It's not the American Railroad. Anyway.
Yeah.
Any more comments, folks?
No, thanks for a good session.
Yeah.
yes, it could well be a time that's passed, couldn't it? But
Oh, I still offer people lifts.
yes,
But hardly anybody hitchhikes.
Well, that's what I meant, really.
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose I got to hear about it because those men had copied what was happening in the war. The people in the forces. You always pick them up, I know, or you're supposed to anyway. And I suppose it entered our culture, and I think it's now gone, or not gone exactly, but I think it's a pity because it's a great way to get to know people and and to travel, and it's what's the word I'm looking for? Ecological as well. So, Hattie, I'm not meant to be chairing, but you've got your hand up.
Okay. In Cuba, the transport situation is dire. I mean, because of the blockade from North America for these 20-something years, the vehicles are very minimal. And there's somebody who wears a yellow suit top to toe, and he or she would be just on the edge of the town and organizing all the hitchhikes. So you would go with your child if you needed to take them to Havana, to a hospital, or you would go because you had a job interview or child in another town or something, and you would give your reasons for wanting to go. They would prioritize them, and they would flag down the vehicles and get you a lift. So even municipal vehicles, which were, again, few and far between, were giving lifts. The only ones that were exempt, get this, the rich tourist buses were exempt from giving lifts.
Funny. One last little thing. Just the other day, so I'm revising my French using the app called Duolingo. And the other day, hitchhiking came up, and I remembered it as faire l'autostop, and I thought that was pretty good that I remembered it. But in Duolingo, it's just called faire le stop. Le stop. So, but
okay, well,
it brought back memories. It brought back
memories maybe.
France.
I have the thing which is going to go on next week, and this is one which I would encourage you not to miss, because we have the indomitable Judy Brill, who's going to come on and be in discussion with Patsy. So,
great.
Do not miss this. It is going to be an interesting hour.
Yeah.
Okay.
Patty, thank you for a wonderful session. It's great.
Yeah.
Really interesting.
Yes.
Very
Thank you.
good.
It was great to hear everybody. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah,
I don't get many opportunities to contribute mine.
Yeah, interesting that so many of us have experienced the dangerous thrill with you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Bye, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Everyone.